I just want to let folks know, I typically use the chat function a lot, but when I'm presenting, I'm not going to be paying attention. So I'm going to trust Joan and know that my last slide is the open-ended discussion opportunity. Although certainly if there's something that we need to pause in between, we will. I'm going to thank you. I was shocked, I guess, when Joan and I first were talking, we were talking about April 16th and then realized your schedule actually had us on Easter. I've never been the speaker on Easter Sunday before, but I do feel very passionately that stewardship and conservation of our natural and cultural resources is a sacred trust and responsibility. So if you were looking for a nexus or need one on this beautiful morning, there you go. There's mine.
Thanks.
I am going to turn off my video so that I'm not distracted by that, and go ahead and transition into some slides here with you. So bear with me while I pull the screen up and get it in presentation mode. And of course, in presentation mode, I can't share the slides. So you gotta hang with me for just a minute here.
Yeah.
Zoom, share screen. Okay. Can you see that, Joan?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
that's slide 2, which you covered for me already, but here we go. All right. So
yeah, there you go. Sorry.
good. So that's as big as I can make the presentation. Obviously I work for the National Park Service, not the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, but I believe we're have the happenstance to have retired Superintendent Phyllis Green with us today, and she is one of the board members for the Lake Superior, National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, and also has done some sustainability work in Isle Royale that's gotten us to where we are today. This presentation is a conglomeration of a few things that we'll talk about here. Obviously, we've already mentioned the 5 parks, and this graphic just shows you where they are in case you're not familiar with them. One of the things in terms of strategic priorities, in addition to this initiative, the focus for the next couple years with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation for these parks includes helping raise the profile of the parks that are not necessarily overrun in the way that Pictured Rocks, Apostles, and Isle Royale tend to be. So we're trying to really help shine a light on Grand Portage and on the Keweenaw National Historical Park, because there's so many amazing things going on there, and yet they're not always the same thought of in terms of destinations in the same way that something that has the natural landscape as the call. If you may have seen some media and heard about this project when we announced it, excuse me, in January. I'm actually on the stage here, my hand right next to Tom Urban. But I want to just give acknowledgement to these folks. The Ascoff Finlayson Foundation actually funded a lot of the work that you're going to be hearing about today. So that was really important in getting this project going and off the ground. And Senator Smith was very instrumental in the Inflation Reduction Act passing, and that is one of the ways that we have opportunity to get some funding for this type of work. So and then of course the link there at the bottom, if you want more information, that'll be shown a couple of times throughout the presentation. Oh, my next slide button didn't work. There we go. These are some of the things that, again, you're hearing and seeing about for years in the parks of Lake Superior, and some of the issues and challenges that we're dealing with. On Isle Royale specifically, you're probably hearing more frequently than in the past about the harmful algal blooms. There's a lot of research going on that. You've heard or seen perhaps the headline just in the past week about the low amount of ice coverage on the lake this year, one of the lowest in recorded history. So I think it was 7% of normal, if I remember my numbers right. So we're facing all of these situations along with, of course, no shortage of visitation, especially like I mentioned, Pictured Rocks has seen a very dramatic increase, as have the other parks. So we are working with each other and with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation under something called the Green Parks Plan, which I'm going to transition into here in a minute, but the movement towards net zero. And we believe that by banding the 5 parks together and leveraging the work that we're doing together, as well as best practices from other parks across the country and best technology, that we can really have a ripple effect, which requires a lot of people to work together. So what is the Green Parks Plan? I did not realize that this was a step through, so I have to, sorry, I have to tab all these buttons on for you here. The Green Parks Plan is something that the National Park Service rolled out actually in 2012 as a strategic and collaborative vision for sustainable operations and practices across the entire agency, which is well over 420 sites at this point. And we're going to talk about several of these 5 initiatives. And the one we're not going to talk much about is the last one there that's grayed out about buying green, reduce, reuse, and recycle. That doesn't need as much attention, right? It's already been sort of operationalized and normalized within our agency and across government to a large extent. I will mention one example that I think is really noteworthy if you're interested in this particular component. Oops, I don't know what happened there. In Denali National Park and Preserve, we had a partnership with Subaru, and we were working on a zero landfill initiative. So they approached the park, and the park in the similar vein to what we're talking about in this effort with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. The park partnered with the communities around the park, including tribal communities, to really make it more than just change in the park to zero landfill, but to also create opportunities for jobs and increased reduction of waste and reuse and recycling opportunities in the communities throughout the area adjacent to the park. It actually is continuing to grow and spread. And similar to this effort about decarbonization, some of those efforts are being rolled up through groups like the National Park Foundation to other park locations. So there's this common goal there in terms of our ability to influence, put something in place that becomes normal and operationalized, and then grow that outward. So again, right now, the Green Parks Plan primarily focuses on the first 4 items here, and the first one about climate friendly and climate ready is the one that we have the most specific information about. I should mention the Green Parks Plan, as I said, was rolled out initially in 2012. During our centennial in 2016, there was a re-release, and then coming up on Earth Day, which coincides with, I believe, the film that Joan was talking about this year, or close to it, April 22nd, there's going to be an additional rollout from the National Park Service. So we'll be hearing more, and I don't have any hap tips of what's going to be coming out other than, excuse me, the information we're going through here today. But I am aware that the director does plan to emphasize the Green Parks Plan. And one of the reasons is, I didn't put it here because it's really text heavy, but in December of 2021, the president actually signed an executive order, and I will give you that number for any of you who want to look it up. It's Executive Order 14057, and it talks about 5 different goals. The Green Parks Plan is the Park Service's response to that. This release of it in 23 ties to that executive order and elaborates on how we will implement that. So first of all, here, the net zero with a goal of 2045, there are shorter term goals available as well. And we are on track. I believe it was 50% reduction of 2008 baseline by 2030. And I believe we are on track for that. Again, a lot of this information is available. The whole Green Parks Plan, you can Google and read to your heart's content. I just want to hit the high points here. Another component of that is about energy use and water use. And these are things, depending on our parks, that have a lot of meaning. At Isle Royale, our biggest energy use is heating hot water, actually. And so these two things are tied together, and we'll talk a little more specifically about that. And one thing that is clearly happening in the world is some types of transition to electric vehicles. There are different technologies for that, different levels of support, different issues relative to where do the minerals come from for batteries, how do we recycle those batteries. There are really good opportunities right now for things, again, sticking with the Isle Royale example, we have, I believe, 5 small UTV style vehicles that are different makes and models, from a golf cart to like a John Deere side-by-side or Gator vehicle that has a small carrying capacity. Our intent is to transition those to electric vehicles, with the priority areas being at the Wendigo and Rock Harbor, because of the impact that it's just a noise issue. So obviously, if you're in a golf cart that's electric, you're not impeding the conversation of people around you. And it's really unfortunate, as you're in Wendigo under the nice picnic shelter there, maybe listening to a ranger program or visiting with your friends and family who just came off a boat. If one of our vehicles has to travel past you, all conversation stops for several minutes while that vehicle transitions by on the road, because the noise is just overwhelming. So that's one example in, again, Rock Harbor and Wendigo, where there's a real practical side of not only eliminating the fossil fuel use, and we have the ability to charge vehicles overnight because they're typically not being driven at night, but they have a real a sound immediate impact on the reduction of sound in those locations. The sustainability effort, this is this ethic is something that is just part of who we are as an agency and what we do, and I think you're just going to see those conversations continue. That's part of what we're doing here today. I'm going to transition now into a little bit about the what. So at the beginning, I mentioned a January rollout of this plan. This is prepared by an engineering firm called Wildan that was hired with the initial grant money that we had. And there's a few of these slides that are a little heavy on pictures and some that are more on text, but hopefully it just gives you a little bit more of a sense of the what. So the kickoff was both internally to assess among the 5 parks what our needs and opportunities might be, and then do an on-site energy assessment at each location in the summer. That happened in 2022. to look more deeply at what the opportunities were, and then to do this assessment, which we now have. And this is a slide you can thank Superintendent Green here for her work in getting Isle Royale on the path to sustainability through photovoltaic systems and other improvements in the park. There have been some challenges with the battery functions and things like that. And so we think this project now is a really great opportunity for us to go back to the two systems that we have at Rock Harbor and Wendigo and bring them fully up online in a way that they're not currently operating because of storage capacity and just equipment failures. And also to transition our operations on Mott Island, which are completely run on diesel generators, we'll always have diesel generators or generators of some type in a location like Isle Royale, which is a different situation for the land-based parks, but we believe there are opportunities to make that our backup system instead of our primary system. These strategies here are just some of the things that we looked at. We wanted to really take advantage of things that are basically on the shelf, not necessarily implementing brand new technologies that maybe are unproven or difficult to maintain in a remote environment like Isle Royale. And also given the fact that we are shut down for half of the year. And so there's some loss of efficiencies there. I had also lost, there we go. So going back to the framework for the parks and how we made the decisions about next steps, these are some of the things that we looked at. And I've touched on a number of these touched on enough number of them already. I can speak to this issue about indoor conditions. A couple of examples I can provide for that. On Isle Royale in particular, we don't necessarily have a need for cooling, but I mentioned that heating hot water is our biggest energy generating need. But we also do have a need, especially in spring and fall, for heat. And so that is a pretty big demand. I can give another example at Pictured Rocks that the park superintendent there, I was speaking with him one day and I commented, Dave, why are you wearing your winter coat sitting in your office? It's not like you just came in, right? Like we've been on the phone for 15 minutes. And he said, well, my office is in a building that has single pane windows and no insulation. And this was back in January when we were talking. And I can see several feet of snow out the window in the background behind him. So those indoor conditions are some of the obvious changes that we need to make to the extent possible in buildings, either consolidating where people are working or making sure that they have retrofits that are cost effective and appropriate for their location if it's going to be one that needs to be heated or cooled. Another item down here under costs, the need for additional staff or training and availability of local resources to troubleshoot and repair problems. This is part of the challenge that we've had at Isle Royale is, obviously anyone who comes out on a boat or a plane, and there are not as many local resources as we might like to have, and we don't have an electrician or haven't had one on staff who can help with cooling battery banks, for examples, or making sure that they're operating. So I would mention that through the Inflation Reduction Act, one of the projects that we've put in a funding request for is Apostle Islands and Isle Royale sharing an electrician position And that would be a new position to support this project as well as our other electrical needs. So I think that's an exciting opportunity where we can use the Inflation Reduction Act funding to build our capacity and maintain these systems and train other people on our staff as well. So, oh, that was interesting. Air source heat pumps we looked at, and we'll talk about this, I think, in the next slide a little bit more. We looked at ground source, but this plan calls for conversion to air source heat pumps. We've talked a little bit already about electric vehicles. There's no funding source, for example, or rationale for any of the parks to be going out and doing complete fleet replacements. But as we work under the Green Parks Plan and our normal operational cycles for vehicle replacement, when a vehicle it comes up for replacement, we'll be evaluating whether it's cost effective and appropriate to go ahead and make that transition to an electric vehicle. Again, things like the smaller ones that we have on Isle Royale are obvious choices because the technology is proven and exists. I know at Little Bighorn Battlefield, we used what were called GEM electric vehicles in the management of the National Cemetery exclusively, and they were highly effective. So feel good about that. And we have some, like our law enforcement vehicles, for example, have some specific requirements and agency parameters for what type of vehicle, and those are not currently available in electric vehicles. So those would not be something that we would be looking to change out immediately. But as technology improves and changes, then we would look to that. And I will also throw in here boats. Maybe somebody's sitting there scratching their head going, well, these are all to some extent water-based parks. Isle Royale has the biggest number of vessels on the lake, but all the parks have some, and the technology there is improving. There are some recent headlines, including I think the Macneck Ferry is transitioning to an electric or hybrid model. So that technology on the small motor side is improving, and then in large vessel categories also seems to be improving. So we are looking at those, but again, we want to make sure that the technology is functional, durable in the kind of water environments that we operate in. And we think, like at Keweenaw National Historical Park, they're on the waterfront. As we look at the smelter location there's, what a great location that might be for a proving ground, if you will, for small electric vessels that could then be help grow the industry, much in the way we did with electric snowmobiles in Yellowstone, but that's another story. So going on to the renewable energy issue, in some locations, I know in one housing unit at Apostle Islands, for example, they're looking at transitioning a house which is not on the grid, getting it onto solar generation and storage. We're also looking at, through this plan, opportunities like Golden Gate and Glacier National Park, I learned last week, are taking advantage of the opportunity to purchase carbon offsets or green energy for their grid tied systems. And so this plan does identify that opportunity, and the Green Parks plan does as well. We'll talk just a little bit here. I think the slides mainly speak for themselves, but just some more examples of the types of changes that we can be making. And if you hear people talking about net zero and talking about all electric as fast as possible, all electric now, these are some of the reasons why those things can be powered by solar and other renewable energy. I was just at a home show last weekend, and it was pretty interesting to see a local power company had almost a slide exactly like this, or a big poster and several of these appliances and vehicles all demonstrated there. So again, nothing you haven't heard about before. A little bit more on the ground source heat pumps, as I understand, tend to be slightly more efficient. But we've looked at air source. We've also looked at a water cooled source, and what we found through the engineering work that went into this plan is that for these 5 parks, for the type of environment that we're operating in, that the air source heat pump is really the direction that we're going to be going. It makes the most sense economically, as well as just, again, for the type of environment that we work in. And there have been pretty significant improvements in this technology. And I'm happy to say I have one of these in a house, and it just went through its first winter, and it works fantastically. So I'm very, very happy personally with that choice. And at Isle Royale, this is the direction we'll be going. And I guess the hot water heaters, I don't understand the technology entirely yet, but hot water heater replacements that we will again be doing as we need to replace systems are also heated with the same technology. So that will be a significant improvement at Isle Royale. This is just a little bit more about the what and how much. That the numbers will be a little more on the next slide, but you know, the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation started out very much on we're gonna 100% decarbonize everything. And we found that there was, through the engineering analysis, there was a tipping point where, and it doesn't have to be all or none, right, as technologies continue to evolve, but somewhere around 90% is actually the sweet spot in terms of cost effectiveness and reasonableness, and just the bang for the buck, if you will. You can see the numbers there, I think, speak pretty clearly. And then there's more specifics about just the actual capital costs. Again, over 5 parks, and their initial assumptions were over a 4-year period. I keep sharing that the Park Service doesn't, you know, we are a bureaucracy and a government agency, and while we want to move quickly, we don't necessarily do that very well. Excuse me. I'm gonna the next slide will be a video, so I'm hopeful that it's going to work. It's short, it's only about 2 minutes, and I believe that's the last slide that I have to share with you before we open it up for discussion, ideas, questions, things like that. So this is the role that that we have in partnership with the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. I will mention that this is sort of a preview. We'll be doing a more in-depth presentation very similar to this. This coming Thursday is the Friends Alliance. It's hosted by the National Park Foundation, not the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. Again, you can find that information easily online. The Friends Alliance is going to be hosting, there'll be Frank Dean will be moderating, for those of you who might know him, and then Tom Irvin, the executive director for the National Parks of Lake Superior, will introduce this plan that we're working on. One of the engineers from Wildan, the engineering firm, will talk through with more expertise and detail about the last few slides we just looked at, and then I will provide a few examples from each of the 5 parks. So that'll be, I think it's an hour-and-a-half long session this Thursday. So here's the nice little video. Do you have audio? Joan?
Dave, do you have to turn on audio for her?
I know, Denise, I think you go into your share screen, there's a button you can push that says share audio.
All right, let's take a moment and try that. I apologize. Advanced sharing. No, it doesn't seem to give me that
You-
choice.
If you click the green share screen and
Oh, here it is. Yep. Share sound. I had to click a couple different things. Okay, let's try that one more time and see if I can get it to work here.
It's been said that the creation of the national parks was America's best idea. The notion of an untouched wilderness, where nature is allowed to thrive and majestic lands be set aside for the people. All people, forever. But what if forever came early? What if our most treasured places disappeared to the changing climate and rising waters? What if we were the last generation to experience America's best idea? But then again, what if? What if we were the ones to stop the tides of change, to confront the threat of a shifting climate? What if we committed to leaving these wild places wild and our cultural resources intact? Not just for us, but everyone who comes after. What if we led the way, decarbonizing our national parks? What if we set a precedent for the nation by powering our parks with clean electricity instead of fossil fuel? What if we put our words into action? What if America's best idea just got better? And what if we stopped asking what if and started asking why not? The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation is committed to creating a carbon-neutral future for its natural and cultural resources, bringing together government and communities, nonprofits and individuals to eliminate fossil fuel consumption from the national parks of Lake Superior, the first initiative of its kind. Call it bold, ambitious, or innovative. We may call it America's second best idea.
There you go. I have, I'll turn back on the video, stop sharing my screen, and ask Joan what she's got in chat. Or if folks want to just chime in.